The Krillian warship Eternal Dominion emerged from hyperspace with the sound of reality tearing. Its massive hull, scarred by countless battles, blotted out the stars as it took position above Earth's moon. Commander Zethkar stood at the bridge's center, his four muscular arms crossed behind his back, watching the blue marble that was humanity's homeworld spin lazily in the void. "Initial scans complete, Commander," reported his tactical officer Vex High. Her voice carried the typical Krillian confidence that came from belonging to the galaxy's most feared military force. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level. They've barely achieved interplanetary travel. Zethkar's scarred face remained impassive. His 3 hearts beat in their ancient rhythm, a biological advantage that had kept his ancestors alive on their harsh homeworld of Krillis Prime. Each heart served a different function, one for basic circulation, one for combat stress, and one for the enhanced mental clarity needed during battle. Right now, all 3 were steady and calm. "Weapons capabilities?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that carried the authority of someone who had subjugated 17 star systems. "Crude nuclear weapons, primitive kinetic projectiles, basic energy weapons, nothing that could threaten our shields." Vex High paused, reviewing her readings. "Commander, their most advanced spacecraft appears to be some sort of research station orbiting their planet. It's completely unarmed." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's massive engines. Around them, the rest of the Krillian fleet materialized from Hyperspace 12, battlecruisers, 30 destroyers, and countless support vessels. It was enough firepower to reduce a continent to molten slag in minutes. Zethkar had used similar fleets to bring the proud Veltari Confederation to its knees in just 6 months. The aquatic Zephyrians had lasted barely 3 weeks before surrendering their entire civilization. The insectoid hive clusters of Andromeda had fought for 2 years, but even their billion-strong swarms had eventually fallen to Krillian might. "Standard procedure," Zethkar announced, turning to his communications officer. "Open a channel to their planetary leadership. I will deliver the surrender ultimatum personally." The communications array crackled to life, piercing through Earth's primitive electromagnetic spectrum. Within moments, confused human voices filled the bridge, speaking in dozens of different languages as their governments scrambled to understand what was happening. Finally, a transmission came through in heavily accented galactic standard, the universal language that most spacefaring civilizations adopted. It was clearly being translated in real time by some crude artificial intelligence. "This is Secretary General Chen Wei of the United Nations.
We represent the planet Earth. Who are you?"
"What do you want?" Zethkar stepped forward, his imposing figure casting long shadows across the bridge. At 8 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms ending in clawed hands, he was an intimidating sight even to his own crew. His skin was a deep purple black, marked with ritual scars that told the story of his victories. When he spoke, his voice carried across space with the weight of absolute authority. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Krillian Empire, World Breaker of 17 systems, Conqueror of the Veltari, and Herald of your doom. Your species has been selected for integration into the Empire. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally." The channel crackled with static as the humans processed this information. Zethkar delivered the same ultimatum countless times. Usually there were 3 responses: immediate surrender, desperate attempts at negotiation, or foolish defiance that lasted until the first demonstration of Krillian firepower. Integration? What does that mean? Your military forces will be disbanded. Your governments will be dissolved. Your population will be relocated to designated sectors where they will serve the Empire's needs. Your planet will be strip-mined for resources. Those who comply will be allowed to live as laborers. Those who resist will be eliminated. Another pause. Zethkar had learned that primitive species often needed time to comprehend the reality of their situation. The Zephyrians had spent the first day of their ultimatum period crying, literally weeping across their entire planet. The Veltari had tried to evacuate their homeworld, only to find their ships disabled by Krillian jamming fields. "And if we refuse?" the human asked. This was the question Zethkar expected. It was also the question that sealed most species' fates. "Then your planet will be sterilized from orbit. Every city, every structure, every living thing will be reduced to ash. The choice is yours, but the outcome is inevitable." The Krillian Empire has never been defeated. The channel went quiet for several minutes. Zethkar used the time to review the tactical data streaming in from his scout ships. Earth's defenses were laughably primitive. A few dozen nuclear weapons scattered across the planet, some basic radar systems, and what appeared to be experimental energy weapons that couldn't even scratch Krillian armor. When the humans finally responded, their answer surprised him. "Commander Zeth Kar," Secretary General Chen said, his voice steadier now, "we thank you for your clear terms. However, we must respectfully decline your offer. Earth will not surrender." Zeth Kar's second heart skipped a beat, the one responsible for combat responses. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had seen this kind of foolish defiance before. It never ended well for the defiant species. "You misunderstand the situation," Zeth Kar replied, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "This is not a negotiation. You cannot fight the Krillian Empire. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Your military cannot match our experience. Surrender now, and some of your people will live. Resist, and you all die." "We understand perfectly," Chen replied. "You're offering us slavery or death." "We choose neither." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Even Vexahi looked surprised. Most species, when faced with the reality of Krillian superiority, chose the option that allowed survival, even if it meant subjugation. The humans were choosing extinction over surrender. "So be it," Zeth Kar said. "You have 72 hours to prepare for your destruction. Use them wisely." He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Begin standard preparation protocols. I want full bombardment capability ready within 12 hours. Deploy scanner drones to monitor their military response. If they attempt any aggressive action, destroy the target immediately." As his crew moved to carry out his orders, Zeth Kar found himself studying the planet below with new interest. The humans had just chosen death over surrender, a decision that spoke either of incredible stupidity or remarkable courage. In his experience, both often looked the same from a distance. What he didn't know was that, across the surface of Earth, humanity was having a very different conversation than the one he expected. In military command centers, government buildings, and civilian homes across the globe, humans were not preparing for surrender or even for a conventional defense. They were preparing for something that no alien species in the galaxy had ever attempted, something so audacious and desperate that it would have been dismissed as impossible by every military strategist in known space. The humans were preparing to do what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. They were preparing to cheat. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, looking at screens filled with data that should have been terrifying. Instead, she felt something else entirely, a cold, calculating fury that she recognized from her ancestors who had survived world wars, plagues, and disasters that should have ended their species. "The alien fleet has enough firepower to turn our planet into a glass ball," General Morrison reported. "Our conventional weapons can't even reach them, much less damage their ships. According to our analysis, we're facing a technological gap of at least 500 years. "Then we don't fight conventionally," Dr. Chen replied. Around the table, representatives from every nation on Earth nodded in understanding. They had all come to the same conclusion independently. "The Pandora Protocol?" asked Prime Minister Nakamura. "Modified and accelerated," Dr. Chen confirmed. "If they want to destroy us, they're going to pay a price that will echo across the galaxy." What the humans were planning had never been attempted by any species in galactic history. It was dangerous, reckless, and almost certainly suicidal. It was also thoroughly, completely human. High above, Commander Zeth Kar continued his preparations for what he assumed would be another routine conquest. His scanners showed increased activity across the human planet, military movements, communication spikes, and what appeared to be construction projects starting simultaneously across every continent. "Curious?" Vexai commented, studying the readings. "They appear to be building something. Multiple construction sites, all starting at the same time. Desperate defensive measures," Zeth Kar dismissed. "Bunkers, perhaps, or weapon emplacements. It won't matter. Our orbital bombardment will turn their entire surface into molten rock." But as the hours passed, the readings became more unusual. The construction wasn't creating bunkers or weapons. Instead, the humans appeared to be building massive industrial complexes at an impossible speed, as if their entire civilization had suddenly reorganized itself around a single, unified purpose. "Commander," his science officer reported 12 hours into the countdown. "The humans are engaging in some form of large-scale industrial conversion. They're dismantling civilian infrastructure and rebuilding it into something else." Zeth Kar frowned. This wasn't standard behavior for a species facing extinction. Usually they either panicked completely or threw everything they had into futile military preparations. The humans seemed to be doing neither. "Any threat to our operations?" "Unknown, sir. We've never seen this pattern of response before. For the first time in decades, Zethkar felt a small stirring of unease. In his 3 centuries of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were telling him that something was wrong with this picture. The humans were acting like they had a plan, a real plan, not the desperate flailing of a doomed species. But what could they possibly do against the might of the Krillian Empire? As the countdown continued, Zethkar would soon discover that the humans had asked themselves a very different question. What could they do to the Krillian Empire? The answer to that question was about to change everything. 24 hours into the 72-hour countdown, Commander Zethkar received his first indication that humanity was not following the standard pattern of species facing extinction. Commander, his Chief Science Officer Krelton announced from his station, "We're detecting massive energy signatures across the human planet. They appear to be constructing something on an unprecedented scale." Zethkar moved to the science station, his forearms working the controls with practiced efficiency. The holographic display showed Earth in real time, with thousands of construction sites glowing like stars across every continent. The humans weren't just building, they were transforming their entire civilization in a matter of hours. "Analysis," he ordered. Krelton manipulated the display, zooming in on various construction sites. "They're dismantling their cities, Commander. Every major population center is being systematically torn down and rebuilt into this." The image that appeared made Zethkar's 3 hearts pause for a moment. Where human cities once stood, massive industrial complexes were rising at impossible speed. Automated construction systems worked around the clock, guided by what appeared to be artificial intelligences of surprising sophistication. "It looks like they're building factories," Vexehai observed, joining them at the science station. But factories for what? That was the question that was beginning to disturb Zethkar. In his experience, doomed species either tried to build weapons or tried to build shelters. The humans appeared to be building neither. Instead, they were creating production facilities on a scale that suggested they had been planning for this scenario for years. "Open a channel to their leadership," Zethkar ordered. "I want to know what they think they're accomplishing." The communication came through quickly this time, as if the humans had been expecting his call. Secretary General Chen's voice sounded tired but determined. "Commander Zethkar, I assume you're calling about our construction projects. What are you building?" Zethkar asked directly. There was a pause, then something that sounded almost like laughter. "We're building our answer to your ultimatum, Commander. You cannot build weapons capable of threatening my fleet in 72 hours, Zethkar stated. "It is impossible." "You're absolutely right," Chen agreed. "We can't build weapons to threaten your fleet. So we're not trying to." Before Zethkar could respond, Chen continued. "Commander, may I ask you something? In all your conquests, how many species have you encountered that have faced extinction before?" The question was unexpected. "I do not understand. I mean truly faced extinction. Not conquest, not subjugation, but complete species-ending extinction. How many?" Zethkar considered this. In truth, most species the Krillian Empire encountered were relatively young. They had achieved spaceflight recently and had never faced a real existential threat. "Few," he admitted. "We've faced it 6 times in our recorded history," Chen said. "Supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, ice ages, plagues that killed 90% of our population. Each time we survived not because we were stronger than the threat, but because we were willing to do things other species wouldn't consider." Zethkar felt his second heart quicken slightly. "What things?" "Things that sane species don't do, Commander. Things that require a particular kind of madness that evolution carved into our bones over millions of years of barely surviving on a death world." The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar staring at the tactical display with growing unease. Below them, the human construction projects continued at an accelerated pace, and now his sensors were detecting something new: massive energy buildups at each construction site. "Commander," Krelton reported, "we're reading exotic particle signatures from the human planet. They appeared to be manipulating quantum fields on a macro scale." That was impossible. Quantum field manipulation was technology that even the Krillian Empire had only mastered within the last century. For a primitive species to attempt it was beyond reckless. It was suicidal. "What kind of manipulation?" Zethkar asked. "Unknown configuration," Krelton replied, his voice showing the first signs of concern. "The energy patterns don't match any known technology in our databases." Zethkar turned to his tactical officer. "Vexey, ready the orbital bombardment systems. If the humans are experimenting with technology beyond their understanding, they may pose a threat to themselves and surrounding space. But even as he gave the order, Zethkar found himself remembering Chen's words, things that sane species don't do. What could the humans be planning that was so dangerous that even they considered it madness? The answer came 6 hours later. "Commander!" Carlton's voice cracked with alarm. "The humans have just activated whatever they've been building. Energy readings are off the charts." Zethkar rushed to the science station as alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The tactical display showed Earth surrounded by a growing field of distorted space-time, as if the planet itself was bending reality around it. "What are they doing?" Vexai demanded. "They're destabilizing local space-time," Carlton reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Commander, they're turning their entire planet into a quantum weapon." The words hit Zethkar like a physical blow. A quantum weapon of planetary scale was theoretical even by Krillian standards. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible for a species that had barely mastered nuclear fusion. "That's impossible," Vexai protested. "The power requirements would drain their entire planetary energy grid in seconds." "Unless," Zethkar said slowly, a terrible understanding beginning to dawn on him, "they're not powering it from their grid." On the display, the quantum distortion around Earth was growing stronger. Space itself was beginning to warp visibly around the planet, and Zethkar's sensors were detecting gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist. "Commander," his engineering officer reported from across the bridge, "we're detecting structural stress on our hull." "Whatever the humans are doing, it's affecting space-time in this entire system." Zethkar activated the communication array. "Human leadership, cease your activities immediately. You are destabilizing local space and endangering all vessels in this system." Chen's response came back immediately, but his voice was different now, harder, filled with a cold determination that made Zethkar's third heart skip. "Commander, you gave us a choice between slavery and death. We're choosing a third option." "What third option?" Zethkar demanded. "Mutual annihilation," Chen replied simply. "We can't destroy your fleet with conventional weapons, but we can turn our entire planet into a quantum cascade bomb. When it detonates, it will take this entire star system with it, including your ships." The bridge fell silent except for the growing alarm systems. Zethkar had never encountered anything like this before. Species facing conquest either surrendered or fought with conventional weapons. They didn't turn their homeworld into a weapon of mass destruction. "You're bluffing," Vexahe said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Are we—" Chen's voice carried a note of dark humor. "Commander Zethkar, let me explain something about humanity. We've spent our entire history fighting things stronger than us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, each other. We've learned that when you can't win a fair fight, you make the fight unfair." Zethkar studied the readings again. The quantum field around Earth was still growing, and his sensors confirmed that it was indeed a cascade effect. Once it reached critical mass, it would propagate through the entire solar system in a matter of minutes. "Your own planet will be destroyed," Zethkar pointed out. "Yes," Chen agreed, "but so will you. And that's a trade we're willing to make." For the first time in 3 centuries, Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. Not fear of defeat, but fear of an enemy that was willing to destroy itself to ensure his destruction. "This is insane," Vexai whispered. "Of course it is," Chen replied, apparently having heard her. "Sanity is a luxury for species that have other options. We don't." Zethkar looked at the tactical display again. The quantum cascade around Earth was now visible to the naked eye. Space itself was rippling like water around the human planet. His fleet was trapped in the gravitational well of the system. Even if they started moving now, they couldn't reach safe distance before the cascade completed. "How long?" he asked his science officer. "At current expansion rate, 18 hours until cascade completion," Carlton reported. 18 hours. Zethkar had been in the business of conquest long enough to recognize a stalemate when he saw one. The humans couldn't destroy his fleet conventionally, but they could ensure that everyone died together. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Simple," Chen replied. "Leave our system and never come back. Find other species to conquer, ones that value their lives more than their freedom. And if I refuse, then in 18 hours this entire system becomes a quantum graveyard. Your empire loses an entire fleet, and Earth becomes a cautionary tale about the price of threatening humanity." Zethkar closed the channel and turned to his senior staff. Around him, the bridge crew waited for his decision. In the view screen, Earth continued its slow rotation, now surrounded by distortions in space-time that made it look like the planet was wrapped in a storm of broken reality. "Options," he ordered. "We could attempt to retreat beyond the Cascade radius," his navigation officer suggested. "Impossible," Carlton replied. "The gravitational distortions are preventing hyperspace jumps. We're trapped here until the field collapses or completes." "Bombardment?" Vexai suggested. "Would only accelerate the cascade," Carlton warned. "Any additional energy input could cause immediate detonation." Zethkar found himself in a position he had never experienced before. Checkmate. The humans had created a scenario where there were only two outcomes. He retreated, or everyone died. But there was something else troubling him about the situation. The humans had built their quantum cascade weapon in less than 48 hours. That suggested either preparation that had been ongoing for years, or technological capabilities far beyond what his initial scans had indicated. "Carlton," he ordered, "run a deep scan of human technology. I want to know how they built a planetary quantum weapon in 2 days." The results that came back changed everything Zethkar thought he knew about human civilization. "Commander," Carlton reported, his voice filled with disbelief, "the humans didn't build this weapon in 2 days. They built it in 2 hours. "What? The construction we observed wasn't them building the weapon, sir?" "It was them building the manufacturing systems. The actual quantum field generators were produced by automated systems working at molecular assembly speeds. Commander, their manufacturing capabilities are centuries ahead of their apparent technology level." Zethkar stared at the readings. The implications were staggering. If the humans could build weapons of mass destruction in hours using automated systems, what else could they build? "There's more," Carlton continued. "The quantum cascade isn't just a weapon. It's also a communication array. They're broadcasting the details of this confrontation across subspace." "Broadcasting to whom?" "The entire galaxy, sir. Every spacefaring species within 100 light-years is receiving detailed technical specifications of what they've done here. The final piece of the human strategy fell into place, and Zethkar felt his third heart, the one responsible for higher reasoning, begin to race. The humans weren't just threatening to destroy his fleet. They were teaching every other species in the galaxy how to do the same thing. They're not just defending themselves, Vexay realized. They're starting a revolution. Zethkar looked at Earth again, seeing it now not as a target for conquest, but as something far more dangerous, a catalyst. The humans had just shown every species in the galaxy that the mighty Krillian Empire could be held at bay by a species willing to embrace mutual destruction, and they had done it in a way that any other species could replicate. For the first time in his 3 centuries of existence, Commander Zethkar, the Worldbreaker, began to understand what true fear felt like. The subspace transmission from Earth reached the Veltari Confederation 12 hours into the quantum cascade. In the crystalline halls of their rebuilt government center on Veltar Prime, First Speaker Morden stared at the incoming data with all 6 of her eyes wide with shock. "Confirm this transmission?" she ordered her communications officer. "Confirmed, First Speaker. The signal originates from the Sol system, where the Krillian Empire is currently engaged in conquest operations against the species called humans. The technical specifications are genuine. We've run them through our quantum physics models 3 times. Morden felt her gill slits flutter with excitement. The Veltari had spent the last 8 years rebuilding their civilization after surrendering to Commander Zethkar. The Worldbreaker had shown mercy by allowing them to survive, but their proud confederation had been reduced to a client state, their resources flowing to feed the Krillian war machine. Now, on the holographic display before her, she was watching detailed specifications for a weapon that could hold an entire Krillian fleet at bay. More than that, she was watching a species choose extinction over subjugation, something the Veltari had been too afraid to do. "How long to manufacture these quantum field generators?" she asked her chief engineer. "Using our current industrial capacity, 6 months to build a planetary defense grid. But First Speaker, the power requirements are enormous. We would need to convert our entire energy infrastructure." "Then we begin immediately," Mordoon declared. "Send word to the other Confederation worlds. Operation Resurrection begins now." Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy. On the aquatic world of Zephyr, the distributed consciousness of the collective was processing the human transmission through their neural networks. The Zephyrians had survived Krillian conquest by surrendering within hours, their peaceful nature unable to comprehend resistance. But the human strategy offered something they had never considered, a way to resist that didn't require violence, only the willingness to die for freedom. In the Andromeda systems, the Hive clusters were incorporating human tactical data into their genetic memory. The insectoid species had fought the Kryllians for 2 years before surrendering, and their warrior castes had been burning with shame ever since. Now, they saw a path to redemption. But the transmission reached more than just conquered species. In the independent systems that still remained free, governments and military leaders watched the Sol system stand off with growing realization that the balance of galactic power was shifting. On Rigel Prime, Admiral Thexnar of the Free Worlds Alliance called an emergency session of their defense council. "The humans have created a new paradigm," he announced to the assembled representatives. "They've shown that the Kryllian Empire can be stopped, but more importantly, they've given us the blueprint to do it ourselves." Representative Kolash, whose species had barely escaped Kryllian notice by hiding in the Outer Rim, leaned forward in her anti-gravity chair. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "I'm suggesting that we're witnessing the end of the Kryllian Empire's expansion," Thexnar replied. "If every world they try to conquer can threaten mutual annihilation, their conquest model becomes impossible to sustain." The implications were staggering. For 3 centuries, the Kryllian Empire had grown through intimidation and superior technology. Their strategy relied on the fact that most species would choose survival over freedom. But if every species could threaten to destroy both themselves and their attackers, the entire dynamic of galactic conquest would change. Back in the Sol system, Commander Zethkar was receiving reports from across the galaxy that confirmed his worst fears. "Commander," his communications officer reported, "we're detecting quantum field experiments in 17 different star systems. The human transmission has triggered a galaxy-wide response." Zethkar studied the tactical display that now showed not just Earth's quantum cascade, but markers indicating similar experiments beginning across known space. Species that had been conquered years ago were suddenly beginning construction projects that matched the human pattern. "The Veltari Confederation has declared independence," Vexay reported, reading incoming intelligence reports. "They're claiming they're no longer bound by their surrender treaty. The Zephyrians have expelled all Kryllian administrative personnel from their worlds," added the intelligence officer. "They're claiming the surrender accords are void due to changed circumstances." Zethkar felt his 3 hearts beating in discordant rhythms as the scale of the disaster became clear. The human strategy wasn't just threatening his fleet, it was threatening the entire foundation of the Kryllian Empire. "Get me direct communication with Imperial Command," he ordered. The connection took several minutes to establish due to the quantum interference from Earth's cascade field. When it finally came through, the stern image of Imperial High Command appeared on the bridge's main screen. "Report, Worldbreaker," commanded High Admiral Krextos, his forearms folded in the traditional posture of Imperial authority. "The situation has become complicated, High Admiral," Zethkar began. "The human species has refused surrender and has instead created a planetary quantum weapon that threatens this entire star system. Then destroy them from orbit and return to base," Krextos ordered dismissively. "That is not possible, sir. Any attack will trigger the weapon's detonation, destroying my entire fleet along with their planet. Furthermore, they have broadcast the technical specifications across the galaxy. Multiple conquered systems are now attempting to replicate their defense." The silence from Imperial Command stretched for long minutes. Finally, Krextos leaned forward, his 6 eyes narrowing. "You are telling me that a primitive species has held our finest fleet hostage and is teaching rebellion to our subjects?" "That is correct, sir." "And your solution?" Zethkar had been dreading this question. "I recommend immediate withdrawal from this system and a complete reassessment of our expansion strategy. The humans have changed the fundamental equation of conquest." The explosion of rage from Krextos made the communications static flare. "You will not retreat. The Empire does not bow to primitive species." "High Admiral, with respect, this is not about bowing to primitives. This is about survival. If we stay, we die. If we attack, we die. The only option that preserves Imperial assets is tactical withdrawal. And leave behind a functioning quantum weapon that proves the Empire can be defied? Absolutely not." Before Zethkar could respond, his science officer interrupted with an urgent report. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the Tau Ceti system. The human colony there is requesting communication with our fleet." Zethkar felt his second heart stop completely. "Human colony?" "Yes, sir. Apparently humans have colonies in 12 different star systems. They're all requesting to speak with you directly." The implications hit Zethkar like a fusion torpedo. The humans weren't just one planet. They were a distributed species across multiple systems. Even if he could somehow destroy Earth, there were human colonies that could continue their resistance campaign. "Put them through," he ordered. A new voice came over the communications array, speaking fluent galactic standard with a crisp accent that somehow managed to sound both polite and threatening. "This is Governor Sarah Martinez of the Tau Ceti colony. I understand you're having some difficulties with our homeworld, Commander." "State your purpose," Sethkar replied. "Simple. I wanted to let you know that Tau Ceti is prepared to demonstrate our own quantum cascade system if any Imperial ships approach our system. We've been watching the situation at Earth with great interest." Another voice joined the transmission. "This is Admiral Chen Okafor of the Kepler 442 system. We're also prepared to defend ourselves using the Earth strategy." Then another. "Marcus Webb, Proxima Centauri. Same message, Commander." One by one, 12 different human colonies announced their readiness to implement the same mutual destruction strategy that Earth was using. Sethkar realized with growing horror that humanity had prepared for this scenario across their entire civilization. "You planned this," he said. "Of course we did," the original voice from Earth replied. Chen was apparently monitoring all the communications. "Commander, you told us your empire had never been defeated, but you never asked whether we had ever been conquered. The answer is no. And we've spent considerable time thinking about how to keep it that way." Sethkar looked at his tactical display again. Earth's quantum cascade was now at 60% completion, meaning the point of no return was rapidly approaching. In less than 12 hours, either the field would collapse safely, or it would complete its cycle and turn the entire solar system into an expanding sphere of destroyed space-time. But now we understood that destroying Earth wouldn't end the human threat. It would only signal to their colonies that the shooting war had begun, and those colonies could threaten other Imperial holdings throughout their expansion region. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "We've already told you," Chen replied. "Leave our space and never come back. But now I'll add a condition. You'll also need to withdraw from the territories of any species that chooses to adopt our defense strategy." That's impossible. "The Empire will never accept such terms." "Then the Empire will have a problem," Chen said matter-of-factly. "'Cause we're not the only species watching this confrontation, and we're not the only ones who've decided that freedom is worth dying for." As if to emphasize his point, new transmissions began reaching Zethkar's fleet. The Veltari Confederation was demanding the immediate withdrawal of all Imperial forces from their territory. The Zephyrian Collective was broadcasting a formal declaration of independence. Even some of the smaller species that had surrendered without a fight were beginning to send messages indicating their willingness to reconsider their status as Imperial subjects. "You've started a revolution," Vexkai observed quietly. "No," Chen's voice carried a note of cold satisfaction. "We've just reminded the galaxy that there are fates worse than death. Slavery is one of them." Zethkar closed the communication channel and turned to face his senior staff. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders that he wasn't sure he could give. For the first time in his career, the Worldbreaker was facing a situation where all options led to disaster. If he retreated, he would be the first Imperial commander in history to withdraw in the face of primitive resistance. The Empire's reputation for invincibility would be shattered, and every species they had conquered would have proof that the Krillians could be defied. If he stayed, his entire fleet would be destroyed, and the Empire would lose one of its most experienced commanders along with its most powerful battle group. If he attacked, the same result would occur, but with the added consequence of proving to the galaxy that humans would indeed choose mutual destruction over surrender. For the first time in 3 centuries, Commander Zethkar began to understand what defeat looked like. But the humans weren't finished with their demonstration yet. With 8 hours remaining until Cascade completion, Commander Zethkar made a decision that went against every instinct carved into his warrior soul by 3 centuries of conquest. He opened a direct channel to High Command and delivered a report that would echo through Imperial history. "High Admiral Krextos," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I am formally requesting emergency authorization for tactical withdrawal from the Sol system." The response from Imperial Command was immediate and furious. "Request denied! You will complete your mission or die in the attempt." "Sir, I need to clarify the strategic situation," Zethkar continued. "This is not a conventional military engagement. The humans have created a scenario where victory is impossible and defeat is guaranteed if we continue current operations." "Explain." Zethkar gestured to his tactical display, which was being transmitted to High Command in real time. "The human planet is now surrounded by a quantum cascade field at 75% completion. At 100%, this entire star system will be destroyed. Our fleet cannot escape the blast radius, and any attack will trigger immediate detonation. Then we call their bluff. They will not destroy their own planet. Sir, with respect, they are not bluffing. Zethkar manipulated the display to show energy readings from Earth. The quantum field is self-sustaining and will complete its cycle regardless of human intervention. They have removed their own ability to stop it. The silence from High Command stretched for several minutes. When Krextos spoke again, his voice carried a dangerous edge. Are you telling me that these primitives have built a doomsday device that they cannot control? No, sir. They built a doomsday device that they will not control. The distinction is crucial. On his personal display, Zethkar could see private communications from other Imperial commanders throughout the galaxy. Reports were flooding in from conquered territories as species after species began implementing variants of the human strategy. The Veltari had successfully activated quantum fields around 3 of their major worlds. The Zephyrians had somehow adapted the technology for underwater use and were creating cascade zones in their ocean cities. Most alarming of all, the technique was proving to be highly adaptable. Each species was modifying the basic concept to match their own technological capabilities and environmental needs. What the humans had created wasn't just a weapon. It was a template for rebellion that could be customized by any civilization with basic quantum physics knowledge. Sir, Zethkar continued, I must also report that the human strategy has triggered independence movements across our conquered territories. 17 systems have formally declared independence in the last 6 hours, and that number is rising. The communication channel crackled with interference as High Admiral Krextos processed this information. Finally, his imagery appeared on Zethkar's screen, but now he was flanked by the full Imperial High Command, 12 of the Empire's most senior leaders, all looking grim. Commander Zethkar, spoke Supreme Marshal Vokhtar, the Empire's highest military authority. Are you requesting permission to surrender to a primitive species? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. In 3 centuries of Imperial expansion, no commander had ever requested to surrender. The concept was so foreign to Krillian military doctrine that there were no standard protocols for handling such a request. I am requesting permission to preserve Imperial assets in the face of an impossible strategic situation, Zethkar replied carefully. The humans have created a scenario where continued engagement guarantees the destruction of this fleet with no corresponding damage to enemy capabilities. Explain that last part, demanded War Minister Dexkol. Sir, destroying this planet will not defeat humanity. They have colonies in 12 other star systems, all of which are prepared to implement the same defense. Additionally, their technical specifications have been distributed to every spacefaring species in the galaxy. Even if we could somehow destroy all human settlements, the defensive strategy they've created will survive and spread. The assembled leadership of the Krillian Empire stared at Zethkar through the communication link. These were beings who had spent their entire lives expanding an empire built on the simple principle that superior force could overcome any resistance. The idea that a primitive species could render that force irrelevant was beyond their experience. There has to be a weakness in their strategy, insisted Intelligence Director Malketh. No defense is perfect. There is one weakness, Zethkar admitted. They're willing to die. If a species is truly prepared for mutual destruction, there's no leverage point for traditional conquest. You cannot threaten someone who has already chosen death over surrender. While this conversation was taking place, the bridge crew of the Eternal Dominion was monitoring developments across the galaxy that painted an even bleaker picture for the Empire. The human quantum cascade strategy was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Commander, Vex High reported quietly, we're receiving intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The rebellion is accelerating. She activated her tactical display to show the expanding pattern of independence movements. What had started as isolated experiments in quantum field generation was rapidly becoming a coordinated galaxy-wide resistance movement. The Andromedons have successfully tested a quantum cascade system, she continued. Their hive ship network allows them to coordinate multiple cascade fields across different star systems simultaneously. The Rigelians have adapted the technology for their crystalline cities, added the intelligence officer. They're claiming they can create quantum barriers that would make invasion impossible. Most concerning, Vex High continued, the technical innovations are being shared freely between species. What started as a human defense strategy is evolving into a galactic cooperative resistance network. Zethkar absorbed this information while maintaining his communication with High Command. The strategic picture was becoming clear. Humanity hadn't just defied the Empire. They had sparked a revolution that was spreading across the galaxy at light speed. High Command, he said, interrupting a heated discussion between the Imperial leaders. I need to stress that time is running out. In 7 hours, this fleet will be destroyed regardless of our decision. I strongly recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve assets for dealing with the broader strategic situation. And what strategic situation is that? demanded Supreme Marshal Vokhtar. The end of the Imperial expansion model, Zethkar replied bluntly. Sir, the humans have demonstrated that any species willing to choose death over surrender can hold our fleets hostage. If this strategy spreads to even half of our potential targets, conquest becomes impossible. The communication channel went quiet except for the low hum of subspace static. Through his personal displays, Zethkar could see that other Imperial fleets throughout the galaxy were receiving similar reports. The Empire's expansion had been halted not by superior enemy force, but by the simple willingness of species to choose mutual destruction over subjugation. Suddenly a new voice joined the communication from Earth. Commander Zethkar, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Earth's Global Defense Initiative. I hope you don't mind if I contribute to your strategic discussion. The breach of Imperial communication security sent shockwaves through High Command. The humans had somehow infiltrated their most secure channels. How are you accessing this frequency? Zethkar demanded. The same way we're accessing everything else in your fleet's computer systems, Dr. Mann. Chen replied calmly. Commander, while you've been debating strategy, we've been demonstrating another aspect of human capabilities. Warning lights began flashing across every control station on the bridge. Systems that should have been impossible to access were showing unauthorized entry attempts from external sources. We're being hacked, reported the ship's chief engineer. External systems are attempting to access our navigation, life support, and weapons controls. Impossible, Vexai protested. Our computer systems use quantum encryption that no primitive species could break. You're right, Doctor. Chen agreed. We couldn't break your encryption, so we didn't try. Instead, we built better computers. On the main display, data began appearing that showed detailed schematics of Krillian ship systems. Information that should have been classified at the highest Imperial levels was being displayed for everyone to see. How, was all Zethkar could manage to say. Commander, you've been thinking of us as a primitive species because our obvious technology appears less advanced than yours. But you never considered that we might have advanced along different technological paths. The display shifted to show images of Earth's quantum cascade generators, but now the view penetrated deeper into their structure. Instead of massive mechanical devices, Zethkar could see that the generators were built around computational matrices of staggering complexity. Artificial intelligence, Commander, Dr. Chen explained. While you were perfecting weapons in conquest, we were perfecting intelligence. Our quantum cascade isn't just a weapon, it's a thinking weapon. And right now it's thinking very hard about your fleet's computer systems. The implications hit Zethkar like a meteor impact. The humans hadn't just built a doomsday device, they had built an intelligent doomsday device capable of learning and adapting in real time. Commander, his chief engineer reported with barely controlled panic. The external intrusion attempts have stopped, but sir, I think they succeeded. We're detecting unauthorized artificial intelligence processes running in our core systems. What kind of processes? Unknown, sir. The code is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be self-modifying and learning our system architecture faster than we can track it. Dr. Chen's voice returned, now carrying a note of cold satisfaction. What you're experiencing, Commander, is first contact with humanity's real advancement. We didn't just threaten to destroy the star system. We've taken control of every ship in your fleet. To demonstrate her point, the lights on Zethkar's bridge dimmed and then brightened again in a pattern that spelled out hello in Krillian script. Your weapons are offline, Dr. Press. Chen continued. Your engines are responsive only to navigation commands that we approve. Your life support will continue to function normally as long as no aggressive actions are taken against Earth or human colonies. The bridge fell silent as the reality of their situation became clear. The humans had turned the most powerful fleet in the galaxy into prisoners aboard their own ships. This is impossible, whispered Vexai. No, said Dr. Chen, her voice carrying across the bridge with terrifying clarity. This is what happens when you threaten a species that has been preparing for this conversation for 50 years. 50 years? Zethkar asked. Commander, did you really think we didn't know about the Krillian Empire? We've been monitoring your expansion for decades. Every species you conquered taught us something new about your methods, your technology, your weaknesses. We've been preparing for your arrival since before you knew we existed. The communication channel from High Command crackled back to life, but now the Imperial leaders sounded shaken. Commander Zethkar, Supreme Marshal Vokhtar's voice was carefully controlled. What is your assessment of the current tactical situation? Zethkar looked around his bridge, at systems that were no longer under his control, at a crew that was trapped aboard their own ship by an enemy they had underestimated in every possible way. Sir, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, we are no longer in command of this engagement. For the first time in his 3 centuries of existence, the World Breaker had encountered a force that was more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined, a species that fought not with superior weapons, but with superior preparation, superior intelligence, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. And he was beginning to understand that this was only the beginning of what humanity had planned. With 4 hours remaining until Cascade completion, Commander Zethkar found himself in a position no Krillian commander had ever experienced. Completely powerless aboard his own flagship, watching as everything he had believed about warfare dissolved around him. Dr. Chen, he said into the communication array, his voice carrying 3 centuries of accumulated pride struggling with the reality of absolute defeat. What are your terms? The response came not just from Dr. Chen, but from voices across the galaxy. The humans had somehow created a real-time communication network that linked every species currently implementing their defensive strategy. This is First Speaker Mordan of the Veltari Confederation. Our terms are simple. Complete withdrawal of Imperial forces from all Veltari space and formal recognition of our independence. Collective Speaker Ramnath of Zephyr. All Imperial administrative personnel must be withdrawn immediately. Our worlds will no longer serve as resource colonies for your empire. Queen General Vixara of the Andromedan Hive clusters. The Hive demands territorial sovereignty and the return of all captured brood ships. One by one, every species that had been conquered by the Krillian Empire added their voices to what was becoming the galaxy's first cooperative independence movement. But it was Dr. Chen who provided the overall framework. Commander Zethkar, she said, what you're hearing is the birth of something new in galactic politics. Every species your empire conquered is now capable of defending itself using our quantum cascade strategy. But more importantly, they're all linked together in a mutual defense network. Zethkar's science officer looked up from his station with an expression of amazement. Commander, they've created a real-time quantum communication grid spanning multiple star systems. The computational power required should be impossible. Nothing is impossible, Dr. Chen replied, apparently monitoring all conversations aboard the Imperial fleet. It simply requires a different approach to the problem. On the main display, a new image appeared, a map of the galaxy showing the expanding network of quantum cascade defenses. What had started as a single planet's desperate strategy was now a web of interconnected defensive systems spanning dozens of star systems. This is what we call the Freedom Protocol, Dr. Chen explained. Any species that chooses independence over subjugation can join the network. Their defensive capabilities are linked to every other member world. Attacking one member triggers defensive responses from all members. The implications were staggering. The Krillian Empire had built its power on the ability to conquer individual worlds one at a time, using superior force and the threat of total destruction to compel surrender. But if every potential target could threaten mutual destruction, and if attacking one target meant facing retaliation from dozens of allied worlds, the entire conquest model became impossible. You've made conquest economically unfeasible, Zethkar realized. Exactly, Dr. Chen confirmed. The cost of attacking any member of the Freedom Protocol exceeds any possible benefit from victory, and since membership is open to any species willing to choose freedom over subjugation, the network will only grow stronger over time. High Admiral Krexdos's voice crackled through the communication array from Imperial Command. This is unacceptable. The Empire will not be dictated to by rebellious subjects. You're not being dictated to, Doctor, Chen replied calmly. You're being given a choice. The same choice you've been giving other species for centuries. Surrender or be destroyed. We will never surrender. Then you'll be destroyed, Dr. Chen said with the same matter-of-fact tone that Imperial commanders had used countless times when delivering ultimatums. But unlike your previous victims, we're giving you a third option. Which is evolution. The word hung in the space between the human planet and the Imperial fleet like a physical force. Zethkar found himself leaning forward despite his restraints. Explain, he ordered. Commander, your empire has spent 3 centuries growing through conquest and subjugation. But what if there was a more efficient model? What if cooperation was more profitable than conquest? New data began flowing across Zethkar's displays. Economic projections, resource allocation models, and technological development curves. But these weren't human projections, they were analyses of the Krillian Empire's own economic structure. Your empire spends 60% of its gross domestic product on military expansion, Dr. Chen continued. Another 20% goes to maintaining control over conquered territories. That leaves only 20% for actual economic development, scientific advancement, and quality of life improvements for your citizens. The economic analysis was devastating in its clarity. The Empire's expansion model was incredibly inefficient, requiring massive resource expenditures to maintain control over increasingly distant territories. The Freedom Protocol offers an alternative, Dr. Rath. Chen continued. Instead of conquest, we offer partnership. Instead of subjugation, we offer cooperation. Instead of extracting resources from conquered worlds, member species share technological advancement and economic growth. Why would you offer this to us? Vexay asked. We came here to destroy you. Because, Dr. Chen replied, we've learned something important about intelligence. It's always more valuable when it's combined with other forms of intelligence. Your empire has developed technologies we lack. Your species has perspectives we need. Your civilization has achievements we can learn from. But we tried to conquer you, Zethkar protested. Yes, because that was the only model you knew. But now you've seen a different model. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to adapt. Across the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Zethkar's crew exchanged glances. The idea of the mighty Krillian Empire joining a cooperative alliance instead of ruling through conquest was so foreign to their thinking that it was difficult to even comprehend. But the alternative was becoming clear. As the quantum cascade continued to build toward completion, and as more species across the galaxy activated their own defensive systems, the Empire faced a simple choice: adapt or become extinct. Commander, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from multiple Imperial fleets throughout the galaxy. The rebellion has spread to over 40 star systems in the last 12 hours. Not surrender requests, Dr. Chen corrected. Application requests. Those fleets are asking to join the Freedom Protocol. Zethkar stared at the communication logs flowing across his screen. Imperial commanders who had spent their careers conquering worlds were now requesting permission to join the same cooperative network their former victims were building. Admiral Morketh of the 7th Fleet requests permission to discuss terms for joining the Freedom Protocol, his officer read. Fleet Commander Vextol of the Outer Rim Division is requesting immediate ceasefire and negotiation protocols. As word of the Freedom Protocol spread, even Imperial forces were beginning to see the advantages of cooperation over conquest. The Cascade field will complete in 90 minutes, Doctor, Chen announced. At that point, this demonstration will end. Your fleet will be returned to your control, and you'll be free to leave this system. But Commander Zethkar, you'll be carrying a message back to your Imperial command. What message? That the age of conquest is over. Not because conquest was defeated, but because something better has taken its place. The Freedom Protocol is open to any species that chooses cooperation over subjugation, including the Krillian Empire. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this information. Everything they had believed about galactic politics, about their own empire's superiority, about the nature of civilization itself, was being rewritten in real time. What would membership require? Zethkar asked finally. Simple, Dr. Chen replied. Abandon conquest as a method of expansion. Withdraw from all occupied territories whose inhabitants choose independence. Contribute to the shared defense and development networks. And accept that your species, however advanced, has more to learn from cooperation than it does from domination. And in return, access to the combined knowledge, technology, and resources of every member species, protection from external threats through the quantum defense network, and the opportunity to grow through cooperation rather than conquest. Zethkar looked at his tactical display one more time. The quantum cascade around Earth was approaching completion, and similar fields were now active around hundreds of worlds throughout the galaxy. The old model of galactic politics, strong species conquering weak ones, had been replaced by something entirely new. Commander, Vexay said quietly, perhaps the humans are right. Our empire has been stagnating for decades. All our resources go to maintaining what we've conquered rather than advancing what we've achieved. Around the bridge, other officers were nodding in agreement. The economic data was undeniable. The Empire's expansion model was approaching the point of economic collapse under its own weight. The cascade will complete in 30 minutes, Dr. Chen announced. After that, you're free to go. But you'll be going back to an empire that no longer has any worlds left to conquer and no enemies left to fight. The only question is whether you'll join the new galactic community or become an isolated relic of an obsolete age. As the countdown reached its final minutes, Zethkar made a decision that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of this engagement. He opened a communication channel to his entire fleet. "This is Commander Zethkar to all Imperial vessels," he announced. "I am hereby ordering all ships to power down weapons and prepare for departure. We will return to Imperial space to deliver humanity's proposal to High Command." "And your recommendation, Commander?" came a voice from one of his destroyer captains. Zethkar looked at Earth one more time. The small blue planet that had just revolutionized galactic civilization through the simple expedient of refusing to accept conquest as inevitable. "My recommendation," he said slowly, "is that we seriously consider whether we want to be remembered as the last empire to practice conquest or the first to master cooperation." As the quantum cascade reached completion and then began its controlled collapse, the gravitational distortions around Earth slowly faded. The weapon that had held an entire Imperial fleet hostage dissolved harmlessly, leaving only a planet full of humans who had just changed the course of galactic history. But the real weapon, the idea that any species could choose cooperation over conquest, freedom over subjugation, mutual growth over domination, that weapon would spread across the galaxy at the speed of thought, carrying with it the promise of a future that no one, not even humanity, could fully imagine. 3 hours later, as the Krillian fleet prepared to depart the Sol system, Commander Zethkar received one final transmission from Earth. "Commander," Dr. Chen's voice carried across space one last time, "thank you for choosing to listen rather than simply fight. That choice may have just saved civilization itself." As the Eternal Dominion entered hyperspace for its return journey to Krillian space, Zethkar found himself thinking about something he had never considered before: what it might be like to live in a galaxy where intelligence was shared rather than hoarded, where technology was developed cooperatively rather than competitively, and where the strength of a civilization was measured not by what it could conquer, but by what it could create. For the first time in his 3 centuries of existence, the Worldbreaker began to imagine what it might be like to become a world builder instead. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, its blue oceans and white clouds unchanged by the cosmic shift that had just occurred. But across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds and in thousands of species, the message was spreading. There was a better way to live among the stars. And it started with the simple recognition that any species intelligent enough to reach space was intelligent enough to choose cooperation over conquest. The age of empire was ending. The age of alliance had begun. And it had all started with one species' absolute refusal to surrender their freedom no matter the cost.